Welcome to Smart in the City, the Babel podcast where we bring together top actors in the smart city arena, sparking dialogues and interactions around the stakeholders and themes most prevalent for today's citizens and tomorrow's generations. I am your host, Tamlin Shimizu, and I hope you will enjoy this episode and gain knowledge and connections to accelerate the change for a better urban life. Smart in the City is brought to you by Babel Smart Cities. We enable processes from research and strategy development to co-creation and implementation. To learn more about us, please visit the Babel platform at babel-smartcities.eu. So welcome back to another episode of Smart in the City, everyone. I am recording this fresh out of my summer holidays in Europe, and I hope you all now are having a really nice fall and had some nice holidays. On this podcast, we talk a lot about digital transformation, of course, especially for public local government. And I'm excited to jump further into this topic in full force with our guests today. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Sherelle Fairweather. She's the digital strategy lead for the City of Manchester in the UK. Welcome, Sherelle. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you. I've followed your work for some time, and I'm really, interested also in learning more about Manchester. So, and with her today is none other than Minu Tegethoff, the senior expert for digital services and technologies for Drees and Sommer. Welcome, Minu. It's really a pleasure to have both of you. I like to get started with a little bit of a teaser to get us warmed up and into the flow of things. The teaser I have for you today is if you could describe your current work with one song, which song would it be? Sherelle, you want to go first?
This conversation because obviously it's a tricky question, and we both, me and Minnie, just started laughing as soon as we read that was going to be the teaser question. So I actually asked the team today what they would choose as a song, just to see kind of where everyone was in terms of their views on our work. But then as they were kind of describing their experiences via a song, I just thought of Bjork, like Oh So Quiet, because it's, there's lots of exciting, very lovely sounds and lovely things that we're doing that are quite gentle, and then before you know it, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do, so many people you're working with, it's all great stuff, so it still sounds nice, but it's just a bit chaotic, and then it kind of goes back down again. So that's my song that I kind of thought of when we had this question.
I like how you delegated out this this question too. It's good management. So Manu, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm going to just give you my two intuitive answers, and I couldn't decide. So I got them both. Firstly, I think this is a super tricky question, like you already addressed, because A, my music taste goes public, and B, this project has been really has had lots of facets to it, really exciting. So I'm going to put it out there. So the first one that intuitively came to me was actually from Queen, Don't Stop Me Now. Because I don't know, it has this vibe in our team when we talk, when we work. The four of us are really passionate. There are two people missing in our that are not here, unfortunately, in the podcast, but our conversations are really constructive, and we're always thinking 10 steps ahead, and we want to reach the moon with Manchester. So kind of that vibe. And the second one is more a visual connection. So Uptown Funk. Do you know the song? You know the video? I mean, not so much the song, but the video, the way it's shot, and I go running around in Manchester whenever I'm there. So it gives me these vibes, these Uptown Funk song vibes. That's, yeah. So I got two songs for you.
Good choices. I like it a lot. Bringing a lot of energy. I can tell that you're very passionate and energetic about your work from your song choices. So I really want to learn a little bit more about you both as people too. So maybe Minu, you want to start? Please tell us about your background and what led you into your role today.
Yeah. I started as an architect, so I studied my architecture in India, and I was directly very fascinated with this digital piece. Of course, it's this Indian cliche, we're surrounded with IT. But I really I saw the potential and wanted to merge these two fields. And at that time, and we're talking, I think now 15 years ago, IAC Barcelona was the only university offering a master's in smart cities. So I jumped on this offer and I applied, and thankfully they accepted. And you know how it is being in Barcelona as a student for smart city, you're sitting in the hub of innovation. And this kind of reignited a fire, a passion for this topic, and I haven't stopped since.
Very interesting. I love also, I've known you for a little bit of time, but I love how I get to know people so much better once I start doing a podcast with them. So really interesting to know your background a bit better. Sherelle, same question to you. How did you get into all this mess and chaos?
Sure. So my background is actually very different to where I am now, but I can kind of sort of see the golden thread as to how I kind of got from there to here. So in terms of education, I have a qualification in decorative arts, which is glass, wood, plastics, metal, textile and ceramics, and then specialised in ceramics. But rather than being interested in the products, I was always interested in the sort of art of making and being curious and being creative, and how that can support people who are struggling or who want to express how they feel or kind of fight for their rights using creativity in the arts. So after I qualified, I started working within mental health and using creativity to support people who were associated with public services in that way. Worked with a number of small arts organisations, and then became very interested in sort of governance and systems and structures and how they enable people and communities to, you know, live in the ways they want to independently and happily. And then I was like, I wonder what it's like in public sector, because if I'm going to be full rounded, I've done non-for-profit, let's see what public sector is saying. And I kind of felt like working within a public sector space, once you sort of embed one or two projects that can make a long-term change, the system allows. Whereas when you work for non-for-profit, you feel that like direct impact because you are with those people, but actually sometimes it's harder to get that kind of long-term policy change. So then I've worked in the council for 9 years now, of which I thought would be like 1 or 2. So each year I'm like, another year to celebrate. But I started off in a neighbourhoods role where I worked with politicians, again, to understand that relationship from political level and how you make change in a space. And then worked for the majority of the time on the work and skills team, which looks at supporting people to access opportunities who may not see kind of a clear pathway, especially because in Manchester there's just tons of companies that are moving here and offering opportunities that just aren't necessarily as easy for people to sort of see how they can get involved. And that's when I started working on the digital agenda. So digital skills was my specialism on that team for 6 years, from a digital just for life and every day, but also a digital for technical skills and employment that might be in the tech space. And now in the role that I'm in, I feel like the golden sort of thread of that journey is caring about opportunities, equality and inclusion for people. And for me, my interest in technology, being a non-technologist, is that actually it's a really important layer that can help to shift systems and really support people who are having a pretty tough time because of the layer of technology on top of the layer of complex systems. So I really care about the kind of so what, like why are we wanting to use technology and how do we do so in a way that is for all and not just for those who are kind of all right so far. So that's my background and sort of the journey as to the thread and where I am now.
Can I just say something to this? This is why we have a great rapport in the team. So I've been learning so much from Sherelle and Megan that I'm here looking at this real social aspect and the impact that it's bringing in our project, because we come from a very technical background from Drees and Sommer. We're an engineering company and we look at, zeros and ones. But to actually understand from them what kind of impact this is making has been really helpful. It's changed the narrative for us. And that's been one of the biggest learnings in this project for me, for sure.
Yeah. Just to support that as well, I'd say I often get like you've not kind of embedded your qualification, but when you do a creative or an artistic qualification, you are taught to have something that's messy and then to sort of play with things and think through how you can create something that is a product at the end. And I think those skills and qualities actually like work really well within the tech space and the smart city space, because there are so many different layers to consider, and you kind of have to fail, you have to find new ways around doing something. And actually creativity and curiosity are proper core skills within like a smart city development, especially from a public policy perspective. So yeah, I think it's really nice that we have such a collective of skills across our kind of team of 4, because it really does help with that social impact. Totally agree, Minna.
I love that. I've never had someone on the podcast that has gone from ceramics to to digital services. So I love that line and how you're connecting it all. So really interesting. Sherelle, I just want you to kind of set the scene a little bit. Also, I think most people have heard about Manchester, at least know the name, but tell us a little bit more about it and your current state in digital transformation.
Sure. So a little bit about Manchester. I mean, as you said, people probably look at Manchester and think city for, industrial revolution. And obviously, we have really strong roots back to the history of that, but also the technology and its boost here as well in Manchester with sort of Alan Turing and some of the stuff that we have here via our education system. But I think for me, the size of Manchester is also really interesting to kind of share, because I assume, conversations I have often when I go along to events, for example, or speak to people in similar conversations like this, is we're kind of just seen as, oh, are you near London? And there's always kind of that comparison, but we're a pretty big city. So our population has gone up 100k in 10 years in terms of people. We're now at 630,000. So, it's a pretty big place, very dense. Population speaks over 200 languages. So we're really diverse in lots of different ways. So I think for me, Manchester, from how does it look? How does it feel? It's a really vibrant city that has a lot of opportunity here based on the work that public sector has done over time with that kind of public-private relationship. So we've got a story of coming from, a pretty sort of gritty city that has a lot of stuff to move from around its industrial revolution and the past there, but actually now it's competing with really big cities. And thinking of technology and the digital ecosystem in itself, it's kind of known as the second best, biggest city in the UK from a tech perspective because of its ecosystem and because of the companies we have moving here outside of London, which I think is something to kind of be really, really proud of. From a kind of digital strategy perspective, we have had, again, a good relationship with the agenda from legacy. So say about 15 years ago, we were very involved in a lot of European initiatives around smart city deployment. We had a team that is similar to what we look and shape like now. And that kind of did some really interesting projects, looked at how we could use technology to really kind of move the council, but more broadly the city forward. And then we had a bit of a gap where we had probably around 10 years where there wasn't that kind of core focus from the city council itself to try and convene external and internal powers to focus on smart city. So we have been a team since 2020. The strategy is 2021, and it's a 5-year strategy. So we're in an interesting space now because we're coming towards the end of that first iteration. And I think for us, it was about learning from and using the levers from previous initiatives and projects that existed, but also bringing them into what do we need now? We've had such growth in population, who, where, and what are those kind of key sectors and key challenges. So the strategy has 4 thematic areas. The first, which is about people in its core. So how do we support those many people that live in the city to feel like they can get the opportunities that have come to Manchester. So there's lots of skills pipeline programs that we're creating with Greater Manchester Combined Authority as one of the 10 authorities within that regional borough. We're also looking at equality. So the tech sector itself, which is probably a message nationally also, isn't as diversely represented as much as it could or should be. So we look at how, again, we can kind of work with businesses to sort of shift what culture may look like to support that kind of encouragement of people to work in those industries, but also stay in those industries. We have a big focus on digital inclusion in that space as well. So again, Manchester has a real great story and a great narrative, but there's also a lot of deep and rich poverty here also. So how do we support people to just use technology for their everyday, ordering things online, accessing GP surgeries, etc. The second section is around wires in the ground. So I always describe it as sort of old school smart city. So lots of the stuff that we want to do, how do we make sure the right infrastructure and connectivity is in the right places? And also looking at how we can make sure national investment is deployed strategically and not just economically. The third section is the sort of shiny, sexy stuff. So how do we celebrate those kind of big numbers that I've talked about at the start and the comparison to other cities and other countries? But also, how do we build our reputation of being a city for and by people? So that kind of tech for good piece, where we're looking at technology being used for good, for social good, and not for harm. And then last but not least, the final piece is around sustainability and resilience. So, more digital and technology, more energy, where is the kind of balance there, and how do we mindfully deploy whilst also using tech to deliver positive change for the sustainability and resilience agenda more broadly. So this is where we are now. Lots of great, exciting stuff, but there's lots kind of more to do in regards to convening against those sort of 4 areas, really.
Really good background and foundation for what we're going to talk about. Minu, you alluded to this project, right, that you're working on. And you worked with Manchester on the digitalization maturity assessment. Talk us through that. What were your main findings? What is this project that you were talking about?
Yeah, to give you a complete picture, I'm actually going to go back to some of the context points that Sherelle mentioned. So when we came in, we had already a report in hand done by the city with another set of consultants that measured their maturity as well. Now you have to remember, based on the history that Sherelle just took us through, this was in 2021, right? I think the report was written, Sherelle. So it was set at that time with the available information and the available initiatives. And from then until now, you see a huge progress in terms of really making the strategy tangible in some sense. So it's just not some fancy words stitched together and put on high glossy paper and sent out as a report, but they've picked pieces out of this report and really tried to start to build a network based on this. So they are at the beginning of their journey. It looks like, in terms of implementation and concrete projects that have been implemented, yet at the same time, their infrastructure or their network that they have built up based on the goals that was set in this previous report, there has been a huge leap. So now they have the tools, they have the infrastructure, they have the network ready to deploy. And now comes the jump. Now it's time to just go into action and the entire deployment is going to be much faster than setting this network up. So I think they've done a great job. They've looked at this report. They critically looked at this report, took insights from it. And from where we have assessed it right now, they have all the tools available. And now it's about really going out there, rolling up your sleeves and deploying. So these were the main points. Now, when you look at smart city, everyone has a different understanding of smart city. This word for me is just scarred in so many ways as well as a professional, not just with Manchester, but this is across Europe. And that's been an interesting finding as well, talking to the different stakeholders within the Manchester city landscape. One understands smart city or even digital solutions or connected placemaking as a platform. The other is talking about old school smart street lighting implementation. So the process has also been quite eye-opening, and we've tried to transparently give this back to the city in taking these different definitions that everybody has and really putting it on paper and connecting the dots to make everybody realize that we're talking actually about the same thing, just using different terminology. So this has been very relevant finding that we hope with our report and the way we've put it together, we can really make an impact and make the stakeholders understand now what the collective goal is. And the third and the most important point is that there is a lot of appetite within Manchester to do something. So they as individuals, as individual regions, there are already a lot of projects being deployed, maybe not necessarily under connected placemaking or smart city, because like I said, there's this gap in understanding what is what, but there is appetite, and they have started these initiatives on their own. And what this team has been successfully now able to do is kind of pull them back, connect them to the entire strategy as a whole, and put pieces together of this puzzle, which has been really interesting to find. I think through our process, so we had interviews with these different areas, and we didn't have the core team as a part of it. So Sherelle and Megan weren't part of these interviews. We did this consciously to really speak to others that don't speak necessarily the digital language and to understand where they're at. And the response has been really great. We gave them their findings. We also gave them findings from other places so they could, kind of benchmark themselves. And this was really helpful because now they feel like this is one institution all working towards a central goal. So that's where we're at. And I think we're so close. We're so close to getting these things on paper, on the map, for everyone to know what Manchester is really doing in the smart city space.
Sherelle, what are the practical next steps do you see now? Manchester has a lot of good things now in place, these kind of pillars. What does it really take to move from maybe more fragmented practices towards really interoperable, equitable, all of these, really bringing it all together? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, and Minu touched on it then, I totally agree. There's that kind of word around governance because, again, the kind of phrase smart cities means different things to many people. And I think when we work with our European colleagues, it's kind of like very well understood in terms of an agreed kind of this is what smart cities is. But I think in the UK it's slightly different because it kind of depends from a city council perspective what service is doing what in part of that space. So for example, if you work in highways and you're focusing on transport mobility and using technology to deploy to improve transport, that's very different to looking at a digital inclusion project with a community group who need to access the library. So I think for us, getting that governance that has the right level of senior leadership to kind of say, we really ride with this, we really want to kind of push this forward and this is how we can support, but also getting those who deliver at delivery level to kind of be aware and have clear ownership of bits of activity will be really important for us as well. So now we have those suggested projects and initiatives to actually look at deploying technologies. It's then, okay, who owns this stuff? How do we put some sort of governance for accountability in place, and even, where does the budget come from, because that's also a challenge for us as a local authority as to, if this is something that really is important for us to drive an agenda forward, who owns it and where do the funds come from? And if we're all clear on that, I think it'll really help to kind of get investment in the right spaces. So we'll be doing a lot of work to socialise the findings that Minu and Chris, our other colleague, have kind of helped us to gather from those independent conversations. And one thing I will say as well, and obviously there'll be a range of people listening to this podcast, but I think having the words come from an independent expert, especially a global company that's kind of very well nested in lots of different places on this agenda, has been incredible, because I can sit here all day and say, well, we've seen this project at Smart City Expo and it's great, but hearing that from somebody who has done a similar kind of initiative in other places has really helped get that buy-in. So I think for us moving forward, it's about governance, shaping that correctly and efficiently to kind of deliver the next step of programs and like implement technology itself. And there's a real big focus for how do we learn from that. So as a team, we've really played like long game. We could have kind of gone in and just said, right, there's a street over there that needs a street lamp. There's something over here that needs damp and flood sensors. But actually, we needed to get those people who are in those services to understand, to learn, to share with us so we understand what already exists. And then we can go in that way. So we've really kind of gone long game. And now it's time, as Minu says, to sort of show action, really. So it's quite an exciting time to be able to potentially start speaking to suppliers soon and to kind of look at solutions and how we can create them. So yeah, they'll be our next steps for sure.
Absolutely. I want to also then touch on that, because the report is highlighting some gaps, right, in procurement, delivery capacity, scaling pilots, and you want to start talking to these company solutions. You want to get these implemented. So from the perspective of companies, we always have a lot of our listeners are varied, right? But of course, we also have some solution providers listening. From those perspectives, what kind of procurement models, partnership approaches, or solution formats do you think make it easiest for them to actually be impactful when they work with cities, or especially with you?
It's a tricky one, because I think it's definitely something that we are learning and figuring out what frameworks and structures will work best for us as a city. I think because we've had to take our processes on a journey, we're now looking at people trust us and there's a safe space. How do we try and be a bit more innovative? I think as a team, especially when it comes to digital connectivity, that's a priority for us, because if we don't have the right foundation, it's going to be hard to deploy any of this technology on top of that. So we really would encourage, now we have that front door, suppliers and companies who are in the space of how do we have neutral share hosts, for example. How do we look at making use of EV deployment linked to connectivity and fibre, like some of our companies are doing in Manchester. So I think having a front door, and we can kind of say that confidently, we're kind of open to having conversations with companies and suppliers as the digital strategy team. And now we have a clearer idea that we can share of what the challenges are, whereas before it was very strategic. We know we have fluffy, dreamy thoughts of where we'd like to be, but we can be a bit more specific now based on the work that we've done with Minu and colleagues. So I would say we're at a journey where it's like we're the front door. We kind of have an idea of what some of those solutions are that we need, or what the challenges are really, and can articulate that now, so we can be a bit more open and transparent on how we share that. So for example, we're going to be going along to the expo, which I referenced before in Barcelona, sharing this piece of work and also sharing the challenges in case there are companies there who can help us to think through some ideas. So we'll be doing a series of kind of sharing events next year, locally, nationally, globally, etc., to be able to find the right people for the role. And then procurement specifically, national procurement policies have changed anyway, and so the council are going through a journey of how do councils innovate so that we can look at public service delivery slightly differently, because currently you have to be a certain size, a certain shape. We have startup companies in Manchester themselves as well that we'd really like to be able to work with in a much easier way. But that needs to be how do we also have conversations with the system and the ecosystem to know what processes would work better for them as well. So yeah, it's a learning journey for us. We've actually recently we had some Horizon fund, which was for the program, the Community City program, working with other cities such as Porto and Amsterdam. And that was to look at how we can create solutions on some of the trickier social issues that we have. So there was a project around anti-poverty, a project around food poverty, and then also cultural engagement. So that was working with small startup companies, the organisations themselves, and residents who would be users, and then us as public sector trying to convene those conversations. There were a couple of apps that were created from a supplier perspective. So again, opening up that space for partnership work in a slightly different way rather than just going through our procurement list. Some of those companies weren't based in Manchester, a couple were. So yeah, we're looking for different solutions. So we're also open to anyone that's listening to this that might have something that's really worked well in their city to kind of reach out to me for a conversation.
It's great to hear how open you are, and also that you have this base of, you know, what you're looking for and how to build that. Because I think so often what I hear from, you know, these innovation companies is they try to have a lot of conversations. There's a lot of closed doors, and there's just a lot of cities who aren't ready yet for those conversations. So I'm really glad that you're taking this approach, and now you're at a place also to have those conversations and deploy those solutions. So I think that's really, really great to hear. Minu, from your perspective, you highlighted obviously in this assessment that, you know, there's a lot of progress, but there's some of the modules developing, defined, rather than deployed and optimized, right? We're just not there quite yet. Do you think, what are the risks that you see ahead for Manchester based on your work? Mm-hmm. Are they at risk for, you know, the typical stuck in pilot cycle? Yeah. What do you see? I'm
going to also address the previous point, because I think sure. they kind of stitch together. So taking off on what Sherelle was talking about, this digital strategy body and the way they've developed this mechanism to open doors to build this network of suppliers and partners is going to lead them to be sitting as an advisory role across all projects. And this is a unique situation as compared to our work with that we've seen across other cities with their governance. Because what happens is that, and by creating so much noise around the work they've been doing, especially I think in the last 18 months, Sherelle, you've been really active as a team, putting things out there, that these different pockets of the city have now started to turn to this digital team for advice, to try to understand how and what is available, how can they deploy, how does this fit into the larger picture. So this was inevitable, and they're going to take on a stronger role as this advisory team. And then I think it makes sense that they are, let's say, the central database for this network. They are the pole keeping everything together. And where I see a risk, or where I would have seen a risk, is going to be in actually maintaining this. So digital is it's an OPEX. It's a living piece of work. Deployment is the easiest part of the job. It's about governance, who's taking on responsibility. There's also a point I think Sherelle already brought up. And this is where I see a small risk and a small struggle. I think, like I said, there's appetite to do some things. They might do it, but it's about how do you maintain it? How do you keep it running? How do you drive actions from this? And how do you even iterate the entire piece? Because this digital strategy body that I was speaking about is going to be as an advisory role, and is going to help you or support you in deploying this. But in the end, you also need to have a strategy for yourself as to what long-term strategy for yourself as to what you're going to do with this program that you're now going to deploy. Do you have not just the technical capacity, but also the capacity to spend in figuring out the vision for this program, the long-term vision for this program? And do you have the stakeholder buy-in? Because not just for Manchester, I mean, Tamlin, you know this as well as I, this is across all European cities, the issue. Things are built, things are made, but what happens after that? So this challenge also will come to Manchester, I fear, even though we have the central body. But that being said, once they start to reap the benefits, the initial benefits of their deployment, and I hope that this will motivate them to keep going on this journey. So yeah, the entire operational piece is that one little risk. That gives me butterflies in my stomach. But until then, we're good.
Sherelle, do you also stay up at night, kept up by this risk or the other ones?
Yeah, I was like nodding furiously thinking, yeah, Minnie's totally right. I'll say as well, because obviously the size of teams vary massively, but we are a very small team. There's like currently 4 will go to 6 to 7. And then there's a small team of 4 who look after digital inclusion. So, you know, the size of us and our kind of role is both public service delivery as well as what's going on in the city with other key stakeholders. There is that risk of how is it governance and how is the energy maintained in the long run. But yeah, Minu is right. I think it feels like it's the hardest part as well, is actually learning from the deployment and not just for reporting to, you know, funding owners, but actually learning from that to then say, okay, this is or isn't working. How do we then deploy it somewhere else? How do we find another solution if it's not? So that piece, I think, is going to be really tough to embed a good enough like process or approach to be able to actually learn from whatever it is that we do, to then share it with those who have the powers to help us sustain the energy. So yeah, if we could have another, 25 people or something, that would be great. There'd be no problem then.
Yeah, always a time and capacity issue for everything, right? But I actually want to ask you as well, Sherelle, what do you think then, as we talk about these different risks, what do you think is the remaining biggest challenge that you're facing as Manchester? Like a lot of cities say it might be financing, or maybe it's capacity, or whatever it might be. And what tools do you think you're still missing to really accelerate the change that you want?
So we have actually been thinking quite a lot about this. I'm also a coach. I'm quite self-reflective anyway, and hopefully, have that culture as part of the team, because I do think if you can sort of learn and sit and have some time to think through what you've done and why, then it kind of helps moving forward. But we've been doing a bit of an exercise where you look at what does 2027 look like, which is the end of the strategy. What does it look like now? And therefore in the middle, how do we kind of get from there to there? And based on the support from the work that we've been doing with Minu, I think for us, if we don't get smarter at understanding what data sets we have, what they're telling us, where they are, who looks after them, it's gonna get quite messy very quickly if we start to deploy different types of technologies. So I think one of the challenges for me is, how do we create whether it's a platform or an approach or an agreed understanding from different data set owners as to how we share information with each other. There'll be loads of stuff that already exists that we're aware of that we just haven't looked at or accessed, that actually could help answer some of those questions a bit quicker than coming up with a new project. So the challenge there isn't just data itself, it's also the expertise. We sit within the growth and development directorate, which is very much about growing the city, not in our corporate core, which looks at how we manage our intelligence and our research, how we deliver our ICT services. So I think for me, we're really in need of an initial resource to do some data exploration. So what do we have? What new stuff do we have that we actually have some control over? And therefore, how do we present that back in a way that says, we've been saying this, but have you had a look at this that you've had for ages? Because actually it's telling us really clearly that there's a problem, or there's something that's working really well. And how do we get opportunities like this to go and talk about that solution, to share it with other cities? So I think for me, separate from kind of capacity, there's definitely what are we doing about data when it comes to the digital strategy? What's our kind of stance, and how do we get the right expertise in to help us do that?
I hear that a lot. Yeah, the data consolidation challenge, and who owns it, and all of these things. There's so much data now that we're controlling and have access to, and it's all a bit fragmented. So, Minu, though, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add to Shreya's point. While it's a challenge, we're also at this real golden moment. So, what the next activity is going to be, maybe Shreya can shed some more light on it later on, but in some sense going to be look at existing data sets and what we have. I always say we because I feel like I'm a part of the city, by the way.
You are.
That's good. That's good.
Looking at what we have to try to, like Shreya said, figure out what the gaps are. But the next step is, once we have this clarity in what already exists, cleaning this up, structuring it, the next step, which is I think going to be the fun step, is public-private partnerships, because it's then trying to monetize this, making business decisions, allowing for even private companies to take on ownership, to support in funding, to take on some of these costs that come with this kind of data management. Because we see this in the private sector, right? Every time we do deploy any services and tech, at some point, if we do this in real estate, at some point the tenants take over the costs, because they are very much interested in this data. But first they need to see the data. And I think that's the stage that we are getting into right now. We're going to get a business analyst, right? I mean, you can talk about it a little bit more, Shrel, but once we have this person sitting within the organization, really from the inside, the only job this person has is to clean and verify and look at data sets. This will, in my opinion, create a very nice basis to, again, take another leap. And like I said, for me, this is like the most exciting part in Manchester's journey so far. Like I said, they built this base or this network with their partners, and now they're looking at this data piece. So they're just before free diving into the smart city space with really large wings to fly.
Good points. Now we come to the part of the interview where I'd like to give you a little bit of an open floor. We got the chance to talk about a fair number of things, but there's a lot more going on. So I like to give this open floor in case I miss something. Do you have anything that you really want the listeners to know that you think would be very valuable to share? Either of you.
I think from my view, like I really enjoy these conversations. And again, really have enjoyed working with you, Minu, because you've obviously lived and breathed technology and its power in places. And I do think that we need more diversity of background, expertise, skill sets coming together on the smart cities agenda, because my experience of kind of working within a smart city space, say even just 2 years ago, it was very different in terms of the types of people who were working in this environment that essentially were technologists and people who were very excited purely about the technology, but not necessarily looking at the social benefits that could come through on that. So I can't believe we've not mentioned it yet, but I was going to mention AI, because who isn't mentioning this at the minute?
We haven't said that word yet.
We haven't said it.
Oh
that's great. Quite refreshing, actually.
But we're probably the only podcast she's recorded in the last 2 years that doesn't have these two.
Usually within the first question, something with AI. No.
I am not surprised, but I think for us in Manchester, and certainly for me personally, I don't think that we could have we could deploy AI from a smart city perspective without having people who think about the social benefit and impact, because it's either going to be incredible or it could be quite painful and push people further back, away from independence and equality. So, yeah, I think because I'm in the land of thinking about people to join the team, I'll be going out for 4 new roles in the next 2 to 3 weeks, in September, October time. I just really want to see more people who also come from that kind of social background, because it is a space for people who have that experience to work in. And there's such a lovely kind of complementary relationship that comes from working with that kind of social minded person to those people who understand how to make it work. So yeah, for me, I think just shaking it up and getting different people in a room to have conversations about smart cities will really see its true value and potential.
Minu, do you have also anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think she summarized it really well. That's, like I said, been the backbone or the success of our partnership. This combination or this diversity that she spoke about. I will go back to your AI point, though, just because we have to address it in this podcast. I completely support this social, or understanding the social impact of this. And this is very important. It requires a mindset change if you want to take people with you on this journey. We ourselves have, of course, our own AI that's been developed, and we use it for currently a limited number of purposes, because we're doing this ourselves, like a small startup within the company. But even though it has not so many use cases yet, we've seen how this has transformed one or the other behavior. Majority has been positive, but there has been some skepticism, and you have to remember with the size of our company, and we are always also looking at our competitors that have deployed AI in a much larger scale, and we are in conversation. We are in constant conversation. You also get really mixed and partially also very negative feedback from people sitting in these organizations. Maybe they were too fast on their AI journey. And this is something we've started to critically reflect on. Take maybe smaller steps, but take them carefully in this space before you overrun your employees or your organization, or in Manchester's case, even their citizens that they want to really take on their journey with them. This is something that I really want to give back out of experience, that everyone, I think, should responsibly look at this. And I do have a question, actually, that I got for our open round, if I may ask, unless you have some.
Yeah, you mean for our segment, because I can lead us into the segment.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, because I would love. Yeah. Save your question. I would love. Now we go into our segment, which the segment I chose for you today is called Flip the Script. Flip the script. You are the one asking the questions, and I'll be the one answering them. I love to do this with 2 people when I'm interviewing 2 people, because that means I get to be very lazy. And basically, you guys get to ask each other a question, and I get to sit back and sip my coffee. So I would love to ask Minu, you had a question that you wanted to propose to Sherelle, yeah? Okay, the floor is yours.
The floor is mine. All right. Yeah, I've been thinking about this for quite some time now, especially because we got to look at their previous report and to review it and build upon this. So we've kind of understood the journey that Manchester has been on their digital journey, along with understanding and looking at their struggles. So keeping this in mind, I know you have worked really hard, Sherelle, and your team, keeping all this in mind. If I gave you a magic wand today with one wish for Manchester, for its digital journey, so that you can get one thing done, what would it be?
Just one.
Oh, and we will get three.
No, this is, yeah, let's have a think. I so I think that for things to really change, that doesn't happen overnight. Like we were talking about systems that have been created well before I was here, that weren't necessarily, some of them, there to support people in the ways that we're trying to now. So I don't think that, overnight we're going to kind of like wave the wand and we'll all be doing lots of digital things and it'll be really smooth and no complications. But I do really wish that the layers of governance would be a little bit more straightforward, because to be honest, a lot of our time, energy and effort is spent having lots of wonderful conversations, but sometimes conversations that just feel obvious. But because there are so many competing priorities and demands internally from a public policy perspective, it just means that you really do have to turn up your convincing, influencing and schmoozing skills to kind of get, one little step forward. And that's not for all services, that's just, some that are on their own journeys and that have their own priorities. But I think I'd use your wand, Minu, to kind of completely simplify the layer of governance, because as soon as we have the right people saying yes, then we can do the stuff that probably is the easiest stuff. So if you can sort out governance for us and just, get everyone to take accountability, that would be perfect.
Done.
Waving the wand. Done. Okay, governance solved.
I'm just calling the Prime Minister. Just give me a second.
Sherelle, do you have a question for Minu?
I think similar note. I'm just wondering, Minu, from your expertise, especially because you have such a link across lots of different countries and places and cities, what you think that one special ingredient is to sustain energy of effort, because I know obviously that came up earlier on in our conversation. What one thing have you kind of seen or felt that another place or other places have done well to sustain that energy?
I think you partially had answered this question yourself. The word is diversity pure. To be honest, without the private sector's involvement in these kind of initiatives, digital initiatives, it is a challenge for cities to keep the goal going. And the fun actually starts once you get these corporates on board, because they obviously have the experience from a business perspective to help you really clean out all the fluff and be very direct in your business goals, at least, and support you in operations in terms of efficiency. And at the same time, you get to do the nice part, which I would say is the social piece within this construct. And by involving diverse partners across sectors in your deployment, you make the chance of survival of every solution much higher. And we need to reach a stage where the governance or the board, for every solution, so we almost always, when we deploy a digital solution, insist on having like a board of directors that are essentially taking decisions. And this needs to be diverse. So you need to have someone sitting from the city. You need to have someone sitting from the private sector. You need to have a citizen participating. You need to have a technical expert. And this kind of mixture, this kind of governance board, I think, is the basis for success and for sustainable success. Because everyone wins in this combination. If you take the risk or land up giving this to one stakeholder group or the other, it's possible that your larger vision gets compromised and the goals you initially started to achieve, die on their way there.
Just to say, it's really quite exciting to hear that, Manu, because one of the things that we do really well as a city is private-public relationships. So how we develop places is via that private investment, because I think as a city, particularly our leader, Councillor Beth Craig, we can't develop a city in the way that we have without having that relationship. So we definitely have that ethos to build on. And I think now it's how do we plant the digital seed within those existing infrastructures to then do exactly as you say. So yeah, really, really exciting to hear you share that from your experience.
Great questions and great answers as well. I always get a little bit like you guys always have better questions for each other than I could ever think of as well. So I love it. Now we get to the final question. And I love how you both already spoke a bit about how everyone's definition of smart city is different, because this is a recurring question that we ask every single guest. As you can tell, as you can imagine, everyone's answers are very diverse as well. And I want to hear from you. I do ask that you keep it brief because we're running out of time. And to you, what is a smart city? Manu, you want to go first?
All right. For me, a smart city is a city really making decisions based not just out of one data set, but multiple, and including citizens in the process.
Very good. Sherelle?
For me, it's a feeling. So as a citizen or somebody who works in the city, being able to walk around, get transport in an easy way. I don't think it's something that we should see, but we should feel that it's easy to live, to work, to grow a business in a city. And that's supported by technology as well.
Very good. Now, that's all she wrote. So I just have to give a big, big thank you to both of you for taking the time. I learned a lot from both of you. I'm sure our listeners did too. I had a great time with you. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having us. This has been an absolute delight. Thank you so much, Tamlin, for the great moderation as well.
Thank you. No problem. Anytime. So we'll have to do this again, and definitely looking forward to connecting with both of you in person in Barcelona too coming up. I also have to thank our listeners, of course, because this wouldn't happen without them. So thank you if you're listening up until this point also. I know with all the distractions going on in the everyday world, this is impressive if you made it to the end also. So thank you for listening. Don't forget, you can always create a free account on babel-smartcities.eu. You can find out more about projects, solutions, implementations, and more. Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you at the next stop on the journey to a better urban life.